Hi, I'm Jeff. This is Tropical Plants at 53 degrees north. So today we're going to talk about tropical plants that I have saved, and there are a lot. There are a lot that I've killed as well, but that's for another video. So what we're going to talk about today is some of the plants that I've managed to rescue, usually through something that I've done. And what I've done is I've split them up into categories. So we're talking about plants that I've saved through some kind of watering issue, plants that I've saved through temperatures, maybe some other factors with pests and things thrown in there as well, media perhaps. There are going to be some plants that's a mixture of them all. So the idea is that not only will it be a little bit of revision for me, but there might be some takeaways for you as well. So hopefully we'll all learn something. Let's jump in. And we are in. Okay, so we're going to start with watering. Okay, so specifically watering of orchids. Now, of course, I've got all sorts of tropical plants in here, but the main watering issues tend to be with the orchids. Now, I'm over in the warm side now, and I've found that most of my watering issues have happened or occurred over in the cool side. So, case in point is Miltoniopsis. Absolutely, notoriously difficult to keep alive with the issues that occur in a temperate climate. So we're looking at Newton Falls here. So I'll just pick this up. Now we're getting to the end of its life, well, not the end of its life, the end of its blooming season here. So it's quite natural that you're going to get some yellowing leaves. And if things all go according to plan, I should start to get some new growth on this once these blooms are over, which won't be that long. I believe by cutting them off, as soon as they start to die off, it's always a good idea to cut them off, because if you don't, it's that triggers the new growth, and hopefully we'll get some new roots as well. So as you can see, looking at that, and yes, there is algae. Somebody asked me about the algae as well. Now, so far, algae's never been a problem for me. It's never been something that I've really been too concerned over. I've looked it up as much as I can. It's difficult to find any definitive research on it. The RHS suggests that algae in borders doesn't directly cause any harm to plants. But what I do, if I can see lots and lots of algae and I can't actually see the roots, then I will usually stick it in an opaque pot, just dunk the whole thing in an opaque pot. These large clay pots, terracotta pots that we get over here, are very, very cheap. So that's something that I would do. But for now, that amount of algae, I'm okay with that. It doesn't really bother me that much. So until I can find some research on that tells me different, I'll continue to let the algae build up, and again, eventually I'll either stick it in an opaque pot or I might clean it out, but I'm not really too concerned over it. So the reason I'm showing you this is because this is the amount of wetness I allow it to get to. So the Miltoniopsis that I've had in the past that I've killed is been because I have kept them in the cooler side. Now, Miltoniopsis reputedly will go down to 12 degrees. However, and I found this with lots of orchids, usually when they say it will go down to 12 degrees, they're not necessarily talking about 4 months of 12 degrees. They're talking about a short-term 12-degree hit, if you like. It's impossible to know what they will survive at, but the 2 Miltoniopsis that I've had that have died in the past have been over in the cool side, and the problems have only occurred over winter. So now I have 2 of them, and neither of them seem to be struggling. This one, not had it that long, I've had it several months, but I've had this spike come on it completely from scratch. It wasn't there before, and it certainly looks very healthy and happy to me at the moment. You can see there is a slight bit of moisture in there. The moss is a little bit green, and that will probably be ready for another water come the weekend. What day are we now? A Tuesday now. I've definitely learned that even the ones that are reputedly wet media lovers in my particular climate really don't like to be overly wet. As a guy once said to me from the North of England Orchid Society, lad, you've got to let them dry out. That's the way he put it to me. This is one of Ed's mates. Much more experienced grower than I am, and he's absolutely right. In our country, where it's very humid a lot of the time and it's cold for a long length of time, and it's also dark for quite a long period of time, You really don't want them wet all the time. So as far as Miltoniopsis goes, for me, I would consider both of these to be saves, really, in terms of I couldn't grow Miltoniopsis before. I tried to recover them. They both died. And since I've changed the way that I deal with how I water them, and of course I'm keeping them now at warmer temperatures. These are at least 18 degrees all year round. And they've got lots of holes in the pots, as you've seen, then that seems to be something that works for me now. So that's the first thing I would talk about with watering, or the first learning I would suggest, that you don't want to get those plants too wet over those winter months, definitely. Temperature does solve a lot of that problem, but hold off. Don't keep them absolutely sopping wet. Still on the watering issue, so we have these Dendrobium cuthbertsonii hybrids here. I'm not going to go through what they all are. You can see what I've done here. So I have lost one Dendrobium cuthbertsonii, which I kept in the cool side. Now obviously the temperature requirements of these is somewhat different. They do like to be cool for certainly some of the year. This one I think is doing absolutely fine. Why? Because it only had one bloom when it came. We're now in the midst of winter still. Well, I don't want to get into late winter, but the temperatures are still very low outside. So they've just gone through at least 3 months of very cool and very dark conditions. The fact that it's producing all these new blooms for me tells me that I've got the care conditions correct. The plant that died on me wasn't in an opaque pot, so I couldn't see what was going on as regards to the water. So I was simply following the usual kind of general advice of every time you walk past it, give it a little bit of water. Nope, don't believe it. They do like, still in this environment, to get pretty dry. They don't want to be soggy. So at the moment, that for me, that amount of green moss is plenty enough to keep them, or to keep me from watering them. I'm not going to water it. Same with this one. You can see this has got plenty of water in it. Was only watered last weekend. Doesn't need to be watered again. Same with this one. They were all watered. Now that one is a little bit drier, but I can still see lots of water there, water droplets around the edges of the pot. You can see how many holes I put in these pots to make sure that they do begin to dry out. As soon as that turns into, you can just see some dry moss at the top there. As soon as I can see that it's all dry, then I will give it another water. So although they're not specifically saves, I'm working on the premise that I lost the other plant, and these are actively growing even in the worst conditions, even in the middle or at the end of winter. So I would count those as saves. So again, it's a similar kind of story to the Miltoniopsis. The watering is absolutely key in these conditions. Okay, for this one, I've got out my Begonia gryphon, and obviously it's on the floor now, just so you can see it better really. Absolutely beautiful markings on these leaves, and if you ever do manage to get close up to one of these, you might be able to get another little treat, because the stems of them are really quite attractive. I like that. It's almost like a giraffe's markings. Can you see on the stem there? Really quite beautiful. And the young leaves on Begonia gryphon, maybe not quite as attractive as some of the other younger leaves on other begonias, but I still think they're rather nice. Okay, so why have I got this one down? Well, Begonia gryphon is, or this particular one anyway, not Begonia as a genera. This particular plant was at the back of the border because it's one of the big ones, but when by border I mean bench. It's one of the bigger plants, and because it's so big, what I was doing was reaching over with my watering can and giving it a water. Now, problem with that is that it was in a smaller pot. Obviously it starts off in a smaller pot. I've now repotted it into a larger pot, and because it was in some kind of peat-based compost that it came in, I neglected to notice that the compost had dried to the point of shrinking, and you'll find that any compost that is peat-based tends to do that. If it dries out, it shrinks, and it shrinks away from the side of the pot. Now the problem with that is that when you then water it, it doesn't re-wet very easily, and the water just drips right down the side of the pot, out the bottom, and doesn't actually water the plant. And that happened on this one, and I thought it was all to do with the fact that it was in the cooler side, but that may have been partially to do with it, but of course it just wasn't getting any water. And the same thing happened with my Nepenthes burkei, which I'll show you in a second. So the lesson from that is that, and I'll show you my Nepenthes burkei as I'm just putting this one back. The lesson from that is that even if a plant is quite large, don't make the mistake that I did and just kind of reach over and save yourself some time and give it to water without being able to see in that pot and what's going on. It's absolutely vital. So we'll just nip through to the Nepenthes burkei. Okay, so here is Nepenthes burkei. I can actually see the media through there, so I get an idea of how wet it is. Now I've actually put this in some different media. It was in like a peat-based compost. It's now in a mixture of moss and coconut husks, which really should stay wetter a little longer, and as I've found, it has been doing that, which is what they like. And if you can see in the top there, you can see the kind of media that it's in. Like I say, it's a coconut husk. So this one was up in the rafters, just up there, and I obviously couldn't see what was going on inside the pot. Same exact problem. We had a couple of sunny days and the compost shrunk along the sides. I was simply watering at the top. I was reaching up and watering at the top, couldn't see what was going on, and it shrunk away from the side of the pot and completely dried up, which is absolutely horrendous for Nepenthes. They like to stay damp all the time. I just saved it in time. I think it might have been like that for about a week. So it couldn't have been totally dry inside the media where the roots are. They're not very big roots. If you've ever seen anybody repot a Nepenthes, I have done one quite recently actually, a repotting video on it. It was this exact one. But you can see it's fine now. This growth is absolutely fine. It's got lovely shiny leaves, and I think one of the things that actually saved it was the fact that I got to it in time and that I have been feeding it with some orchid spray. Again, I had a little chat with somebody about this in the comments, and I feel that even though I think foliar feeds is not totally proven, I think with something like a Nepenthes, because it's already getting its nutrition through what is basically like the modified end of a leaf, I wonder if that's why it does seem to respond really well to spraying it with a feed. So it could be that the leaves of a Nepenthes is just particularly adapted to taking its nutrition through its leaves. It's not scientific that, but you know, as I've mentioned on videos before, two of the top authors on Nepenthes have said that it's a good idea to spray your Nepenthes with like a dilute orchid feed. So that's done really well. But the lesson from these two plants is that it really does benefit you to make sure that you can see what's going on in the pot, or you can lift it up. I know it's not always possible, especially if you've got loads and loads of plants and they're all kind of positioned so that you've got one in front of the other and you can't easily reach over. But if you can't, then you could potentially get the same problem that I did there. Okay, still on the watering, just as we go past this, I'll just point this out just because it's so nice. It's hard to ignore, isn't it? So this is my, I think it's my third version of naming this plant. So this is a Rhyncattleanthe, Shinfong little son, young min, golden boy. So the Grex is Shinfong little son, the cultivar name is young min, golden boy, and the genus name is Rhyncattleanthe. So I've had it as I think it was a Brassolaeliocattleya, and I've only found reference to that name from like prior to 2014. Since then, it does seem to have changed its name, and somebody else said it was once a potinaria. Anyway, whatever it is, it's lovely. So, Zygopetalum. Now, this is the only Zygopetalum I've ever had, but it's not been without its problems. Again, this is another one that was doing fine in the cooler side. However, some of you might have spotted with your Zygopetalum that it gets spotted leaves.